The morning I almost left for good started like any other Tuesday. I had my coat on, my keys in my hand, my purse over my shoulder. The drive to Hartwell and Associates was only 12 minutes, and I'd been planning this errand for a week. Dropping off the original deed to our house, along with the notarized letter Eugene had drafted before he passed. The one that made clear exactly what was to be done with the property if anything ever happened to me. I made it all the way to the end of the driveway before I stopped. The folder. I had left the folder on the kitchen counter. I turned the car around, pulled back into the garage, and let myself in through the side door without making a sound. I wasn't quiet on purpose. I was just tired, and my shoes were soft-soled, and the house was the kind of quiet it gets when you think no one is home. Lynette's car was in the driveway. I had noticed it, but I assumed she had just dropped by to water the plants the way she sometimes did when she knew I'd be out. I was wrong. Their voices came from the kitchen before I even reached the hallway. Lynette's and Brett's both. Brett, who had driven 40 minutes from his office for no reason I had been given. I stopped at the edge of the hall. My hand found the wall. "She's not going to like it," Lynette said. "She doesn't have to like it." Brett's voice was the way it always was when he was discussing a transaction. Flat, efficient. She just has to sign. And if she won't? There was a pause. I heard the refrigerator open and close. That's why we talked to Dr. Fenwick first. Get it documented. A few incidents, a few concerns on record. At her age, it doesn't take much to build a picture. I stood there with my hand pressed flat against the wallpaper, the yellow stripe pattern Eugene and I had chosen at a hardware store in 2001. I didn't breathe. I was listening to my son-in-law explain how to dismantle my life one doctor's appointment at a time. "She's sharp, Brett. You know she is. She's grieving and she's alone, and she's 68 years old in a 4-bedroom house she can barely keep up with. That's not sharp. That's a liability." I backed away. My shoes made no sound. I did not take the folder from the counter. I walked back through the side door, started the engine, and sat in the driveway with my hands on the wheel and the garage door still open behind me. I have been a teacher for 31 years. I have stood in front of teenagers who lied to my face, who handed me plagiarized essays with steady eyes and a straight spine. I know when someone is saying words and meaning something else entirely. What I heard in that kitchen wasn't worry. It wasn't love wearing a clumsy face. It was strategy. And the subject of the strategy was me. I drove. I didn't call the attorney's office to say I was running late. I didn't call my sister. I just let my hands take me somewhere familiar, and they brought me to Merriman's on Broad. The coffee shop Eugene and I had walked to every Saturday for 9 years, even after his hip got bad. He would bring a book he was pretending to read, and mostly just watch people through the window. I would bring student essays in a canvas tote and red pen them at the corner table. I ordered a plain coffee, black. I sat at the corner table, and I did not bring out any papers. The couple near the window was young, maybe 30, maybe less. The man was reading something on his phone, and the woman was watching the street outside. One set of earbuds shared between them, the wire trailing down into a shared coat pocket. Something about it made me look away. Eugene and I had 34 years. We raised one daughter in a house we paid off together. He coached her soccer teams. I helped with her college application essays. When she married Brett 7 years ago in a garden ceremony outside of Asheville, I stood in the front row and I thought, this is what it looks like when things go right. It's thought to cost. I sat with my coffee for a long time. By the time I drove home, I had made a decision. Not to confront anyone. Not yet. I needed to understand the full shape of what I was dealing with before I said a single word, because I had spent enough years in front of a classroom to know. When you react before you're ready, you hand the advantage to the other side. The box was in the spare closet on the top shelf, behind my winter coats and a broken humidifier. I had labelled it Eugene, office in black marker 2 months after he passed, when I finally got around to clearing out his desk in the study. I pulled it down that evening. Inside were the ordinary things. Dried-out pens, a stapler, a coffee mug, shaped like a first edition of The Grapes of Wrath that his graduate students had given him as a joke in 2009. He had kept it anyway. He kept everything. At the bottom of the box, beneath a rubber-banded stack of index cards, I found the planner. Eugene kept paper planners his entire adult life. He didn't trust the cloud, which was something he said with the mild suspicion of a man who had watched plenty of reliable things disappear. The planner from his last full year was navy blue, with a small crack along the spine. I had seen it on his desk 100 times. I hadn't opened it since he died. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned to the back pages, where he kept notes that didn't fit anywhere else. Grocery lists, phone numbers written down on impulse, reminders to himself, call the roofer, check the crawl space, remind Wanda about her eye appointment. And then, on the second to last page, in his careful block print, Wanda, the house stays in your name alone. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise, no matter how reasonable it sounds. You have always been the one who sees clearly. Trust that. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a letter. It was just a note, the way he always left notes, on the backs of envelopes, in the margins of library books, on sticky pads he stuck to the coffee maker. This one just happened to be the most important thing I had read in 14 months. I held the planner in my lap and looked at his handwriting until I couldn't see it clearly anymore. Then I closed it, set it on the nightstand, and went to find Ruby Castillo's number. Ruby and I had served together on the PTA board for 6 years back when our daughters were in middle school. She was methodical in ways that made other people uncomfortable. She read every document before signing, asked follow-up questions at meetings that no one else thought to ask, and once caught an error in the school district's budget that saved them from a lawsuit. After her kids were grown, she went to paralegal school at 52 and spent 14 years at a small estate law firm before she retired. I had not called her in almost 2 years, but her number was still in my phone. She called back within 20 minutes. I told her only what she needed to know. That I had reason to believe someone was building a case against my competence, that financial documents were being accessed without my explicit knowledge, and that I needed help understanding what my options were. She said, "I'll be there Thursday at 11. She arrived at 10:58, which was exactly what I expected. We sat at the kitchen table with the deed, Eugene's planner, and a legal pad I had already started filling in. I had written down the exact words I remembered from that morning in the hallway. I had checked my online accounts, the one that had transferred into my sole name after Eugene passed, and found a record of a phone call Brett had made to the bank in March. The fraud department had left me a voicemail I had dismissed at the time as routine. Ruby looked at the account activity printout for a long moment. "Has he ever had legal access to any of your accounts?" "No, never." She nodded. She asked about my current power of attorney. I explained that Eugene and I had written reciprocal ones years ago, but that his had dissolved at his death and mine had never named a successor. "That's the first thing we fix," she said. "We designate a trusted agent, someone who is not Brett, not Lynette, not connected to either of them. Then we document your current capacity, proactively." I made the call to my doctor that afternoon. Dr. Pruitt had been my physician for 11 years. He did not seem surprised when I explained what I wanted. He said he'd seen the same request more than most people would guess, and that was a particular kind of sad I didn't have time to sit with just then. The assessment took 45 minutes. Memory, processing, judgment, abstract reasoning. I corrected him once gently on the sequence of a list he recited out of order. He smiled and made a note. He handed me a signed letter on clinic letterhead 3 days later. No evidence of cognitive impairment. Patient demonstrates full decision-making capacity. I slid it into the folder I was now carrying with me everywhere. The folder held the deed, Eugene's planner, Dr. Pruitt's letter, the record of Brett's unauthorized bank inquiry, a newly drafted durable power of attorney naming Ruby and my sister Alma as co-agents, and a handwritten list of everything I intended to do over the next 30 days. I had spent 3 decades handing out reading lists. I understood what it meant to have a plan and work it one line at a time. My daughter came by that Saturday with a pot of vegetable soup. She had been coming on Saturdays since Eugene died, which I had always been grateful for. I had not told her what I overheard. I did not plan to. Not yet. I moved slower than usual that afternoon. I let her see me pause mid-sentence and look out the window as though I'd lost the thread. When she asked what I'd been doing during the week, I said I couldn't quite remember. It all ran together some days. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Brett came inside from checking something in the garage. I hadn't asked him to check anything. He was the kind of man who moved through other people's houses as though he were already assessing them for resale potential. He mentioned that the gutter on the north side looked like it needed clearing. He said he could have someone come look at things, the HVAC unit, the foundation near the back step, the sort of things that become harder to manage on your own after a while. He said it gently, the way you'd tell someone the car needs new tires. Helpful, practical. I looked at him over my coffee cup and let my eyes go just slightly unfocused, the way they do when you're searching for something just out of reach. I said that sounded nice. His shoulders dropped a fraction. He was satisfied the way people are when a plan is unfolding without friction. Underneath the stack of mail on the counter behind me, there was a small voice recorder I had purchased Monday at an electronics store on the way home from Ruby's. It had been running since Brett came through the front door. Ruby came by Tuesday evening. We transferred everything to an encrypted flash drive, and she kept a copy in her home safe. She had already spoken to an attorney at her former firm, not to file anything, just to have the relationship in place if we needed it quickly. She slid a document across the table. A formal revocation of any financial authority that might have been extended by habit or oversight. The sort of access that builds quietly through small conveniences until one day someone has more reach into your life than you ever consciously offered. I thought about the automatic payments Brett had set up for my homeowner's insurance renewal the previous year. He had said it was easier. I had thanked him. I signed the revocation that night. Ruby had it notarized by Friday. A certified letter arrived on a Thursday morning from a firm I didn't recognize, with a downtown return address. The document inside described itself as a preliminary assessment of estate management needs. There was language about assisted living transition support, financial conservatorship consultation. Brett's name was nowhere on it, but the firm's name was one Ruby recognized immediately when I read it to her over the phone. "That's the one," she said. "They filed 2 similar cases in this county last year." I set the letter on the kitchen table and looked at it for a while. There was a particular coldness in seeing it laid out like that. The words that had lived in my chest since that morning in the hallway, now printed on cream stationery with an embossed logo. Someone had paid to have this drafted. Someone had believed this was going to be easy. I called Ruby back and told her it was time. 2 days later, she delivered our response to the firm's office in person. Inside the envelope, a certified copy of my durable power of attorney, Dr. Pruitt's assessment letter, a notarized affidavit of legal and mental capacity signed by Dr. Pruitt and 2 additional witnesses, a copy of the deed showing sole unencumbered ownership in my name, a printed record of Brett's unauthorized inquiry to my bank, and a cover letter, drafted with help from Ruby's former colleague, stating that any further attempt to pursue conservatorship or financial oversight without my explicit, documented consent would be treated as elder financial coercion under state law, and that we had already prepared for that eventuality. Ruby called me from the parking garage after she left it with the receptionist. "It's done," she said. I thanked her. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "See what they do with it." 3 days later, the firm's senior partner called. He was brief, professional. He said the matter had been reviewed and they would not be pursuing further action. He did not name Brett. He did not need to. I said I appreciated his call. I hung up and sat at Eugene's old desk in the study and watched the afternoon light come through the window the way it always did in October, low and golden, landing on the groove in the desk surface where he had rested his pen for 30 years. I thought about the note in the planner. "You have always been the one who sees clearly. Trust that." He had known me better than I sometimes knew myself, and he had left a compass in the last place I would have thought to look. Brett arrived on a Wednesday without calling. I had been expecting it. I opened the door and stepped aside to let him in. He was holding a folder under one arm. His face was composed, but there was something adjusted in his expression. The particular look of a man who has come to salvage a negotiation that has already gone wrong. We sat in the living room. He started by saying there had been a misunderstanding, that his intentions had only ever been to help, that he had been worried, genuinely worried, about what would happen to me if something went wrong. I let him finish. When he stopped talking, I reached beside me and set 3 documents on the coffee table. The deed, the power of attorney, Dr. Pruitt's letter. I aligned them the way I used to align returned papers on a student's desk, carefully, without rush. "I'm not confused," I said. "I'm not struggling. I know exactly what this house is worth, exactly what my accounts hold, and exactly what a conservatorship filing would have meant for my life. I have documentation for all of it, and so does my attorney." He looked at the papers. He did not touch them. "I know what was said in this kitchen 3 weeks ago," I said. "I know what that letter was and who asked that firm to draft it." He said nothing. His eyes moved somewhere past my left shoulder. "I am not asking for an apology," I said. "I'm telling you that this particular plan is finished and that anything further along these lines will be met with a legal response I have already fully prepared." He stood. He gathered his folder. He said quietly that he had never meant any harm. I looked at him and said nothing, because there was nothing useful left to say. He walked to the door on his own, past the photograph of Eugene, holding Lynette at her kindergarten graduation, past the umbrella stand where his own coat had hung 100 times. He opened the door and he left, and I locked it behind him. In the bookshelf behind me, the recorder had captured every word. I made tea. I sat with it until it was cold. My daughter called that night. She didn't say much at first. She said she was sorry. She said she had known what Brett was doing and hadn't known how to stop it, and that Somewhere in the middle of it, she had told herself she was doing it for me, which she knew now was not the truth. I listened. She asked if she could come over that weekend. I said yes. I told her to come alone. She arrived Saturday with nothing but her purse and a box of the shortbread cookies I have always liked. We sat at the kitchen table the way we used to when she was in high school, when she would come home carrying something heavy, and we would just sit together with it until it lifted. Some conversations have to be had before they're comfortable. We had ours, all of it. I told her what I had heard that morning in the hallway. She told me how it had started. One conversation with Brett about property values in the neighbourhood, then another about long-term care costs, then a plan that had assembled itself from small rationalizations, each one feeling reasonable on its own. I told her I was not going anywhere, that I was staying in this house because it was mine, and because I wanted to, and because Eugene and I had decided that together a long time ago. I told her I was not fragile, I was not diminished. I was not a problem to be managed by someone else's hand. She didn't argue. She nodded, and her eyes were wet, and she let me finish. We ate the shortbread, and I made her a second cup of tea. When she left, she hugged me in the doorway for longer than she had in years. I let her. I hugged her back. Ruby's nephew is studying for his bar exam and has been renting the spare room since November. He is quiet and methodical and leaves the kitchen the way he found it, which matters more than most people realize when you've been living alone for over a year. He asked once if he could use the study to review case files, and I said of course. And now some evenings I can hear him reading statutes aloud to himself down the hall. A low, steady voice, working through language that has weight to it. It is not unlike having someone at a desk again. Not the same, but not empty either. I go to Merriman's on Broad most Saturday mornings. I bring a book I am actually reading, the real ones, the ones Eugene would have liked and probably argued with. I sit at the corner table, order plain black coffee, and let the morning move around me without trying to hold it in place. There is a version of this story where I never turned back for that folder, where I drove to the attorney's office, filed the papers, flew to see my sister in Savannah, and came home 2 weeks later to a different landscape, one where documents had already been filed, and the ground beneath my feet had shifted without a sound. I think about that version sometimes, not with fear, with something closer to gratitude, for the folder I forgot, for the soft soles of my shoes, for the instinct that told me to listen instead of announce myself, and for the note in the back of a Navy planner left by a man who had lived beside me long enough to know that someday I might need to be reminded of who I was. He knew I would find it. He just didn't tell me when. That was enough. It turned out that was more than enough.